Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Very happy to be back here on a Monday afternoon. And thank you very much for being here with us. I gotta say, if you had to say, what's the word that defines our times? It could very well be anxiety. If you had to get it down to one word, it could be anxiety. Both the church and science very concerned, deeply concerned with the amount of anxiety and just the fact of anxiety. So that's what we're going to talk about this hour. If you want to talk about anxiety, your own or someone else's, 888 318 7884, 888 318 7884. Our guest, of course, if we're going to talk about a psychological issue from the perspective of both faith and science, it'd be Dr. Greg Popcak. He's a Catholic counselor, author, speaker. He's the founder and executive director of the Pastoral Solutions Institute. You can hear him each weekday on More to Life on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. And among his many books, Unworried, A Life Without Anxiety, 888-318-7884. Dr. Greg Popcak, is that really possible? A life without anxiety?
Sounds crazy, right? Well, so one of the things I talk about in the book is the difference between being concerned about something and being anxious about it.
Uh-huh.
Because there is a difference, right? So, I mean, it's perfectly normal to have concerns about concerning things, right? You have a problem, you should be concerned about that. But a concern enables us to see the problem, gather resources, make a plan, and address it. Whereas anxiety has us look at the problem and say, wow, that's a big problem. That problem's going to run me over. I don't know how I'm going to deal with that problem. What am I going to do about the problem? And then I start to spin out.
Right.
And so you can have a life without anxiety. You can't have a life without concerns, but you can have a life without anxiety because it's really all about how you approach those concerns, whether you allow the concerns to kind of roll you over and separate you from God's grace and from the supportive people in your life and the resources that God's given you to deal with things, or you are able to respond to those concerns in a thoughtful, intentional, prayerful way.
Again, Dr. Greg Popcak, our guest. We're talking anxiety today, 888-318-7884. Most people think that anxiety and worry are either the same thing or that anxiety comes from worrying about problems, but you say that's not the case. What's the real cause of our anxiety?
Yeah, so this is actually kind of surprising. Because we do tend to think that, of course, if I have problems, I'm going to be anxious about them. And that's what causes the anxiety. Really, it's that anxiety is caused when we feel separated from the people in our life and from the connections in our life. So, for example, Augustine actually spoke to this. He talked about the difference between the press of troubles and oppression. The press of troubles is just the stuff we have to deal with. Oppression is when we allow the press of troubles, the stuff we have to deal with, to separate us from God and the people that God's placed in our life to support us. And think about it this way, right? If you're going through a tough time, but you've got a ton of people around you who love you, who care for you, who are showing up for you, who are helping you out and encouraging you, you don't feel all that anxious. I mean, you're like you said, you have concerns, but you're dealing with it, right? But let's say a day where you don't have too many problems, but you feel cut off from God or from the people in your life, you don't feel supported by the people around you, you're going to feel anxious anyway, even if you don't have any big problems to deal with. It has to do with the strength and health of our connections more than it does with the degree of our problems. And so anxiety really, well, think of it this way, if we're walking through the woods, right? If I'm a Neanderthal walking through the woods, I got, and by myself, I got to be on the lookout for the saber-toothed tiger that's going to jump out and eat me, right?
Yes.
But if I'm walking with my tribe, I can be calm and relaxed because I got people who have my back. So anxiety is that hardwired part of us that lets us know that we don't feel supported or connected.
Right.
And so we have to be on heightened awareness about the things that are happening to us.
Wow. Yeah. So that really ties in then with this social media isolation that people get into, huh? Because if you're kind of whittling away your tribe, or you're not even giving yourself an opportunity to have a tribe if you're always online.
Yeah, it's funny. Well, and it is funny because in some ways we're more connected than we've ever been, but we're
Right.
lonelier than we've ever been. And there's actually a book by Terry Pratchett called Good Omen, Bad Omens, and it talks. It's sort of his humorous take on the end of the world, right? And he has the four horsemen of the apocalypse, right? And but he has them as motorcycle gang members, and when famine rides out on his motorcycle, and what he does is he invents a diet food that you can eat as much of as you want, but it has absolutely no nutritional value, and you starve to death when you eat it. And that's social media, right? We're
Right.
eating social media, we're consuming social connection, and we're starving at the same time. And that is feeding into anxiety because we
Mm-hmm.
we have the illusion of connection without any real connection at the same time, and so we do feel more isolated than ever, which then contributes to that heightened sense of anxiety that so many people have today.
Dr. Greg Popcak, our guest, your calls are welcome, 888-318-7884. So if I am anxious or I do have anxiety, does that point to the fact that I don't trust God enough or somehow I'm a bad Christian?
Oh, that's a big one, right? And no, the short answer, of course, is no. But it's
Okay.
easy to think that way because the scripture says over and over again, "Have no anxiety at all." Do not be afraid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do not be concerned about the problems of today. And we hear all that and we think, "Gosh, I must be letting God down if I'm feeling anxious or I'm feeling worried about something." And I was actually talking about this on More to Life earlier today. You know, when we hear God isn't any more disappointed in us for being anxious than we would be disappointed in our children for catching the flu, right?
Oh,
We
yeah.
see our kids and we feel badly for them. We don't want them to be sick. We want to help them and heal them, right? But we're not mad at them for being sick. And the same thing is true with God. He sees us suffering from anxiety and he wants to heal us and he wants to remind us that this is not what you were made for, and I want to deliver you from it and heal you of it. Um, but he's not mad at us or disappointed in us for being anxious. We it's something that we suffer with as a result of the human condition. The fall is all about disconnection, right?
Yeah.
St. John Paul, talked about how in the very beginning, before the fall, there was original unity. That
Yes.
God and man and woman were one, and we experienced that intimate connection, and we weren't afraid. But what's the first thing that happened after the fall? It was the first panic attack, right, in recorded history. Suddenly, Adam and Eve, they go and hide behind the bushes, right?
Right, right.
Because they're afraid. All of a sudden, they realized how vulnerable they were. The world is big and huge and scary, and I'm just here naked. I'm going to go hide behind some bushes because what else am I going to do? And we feel like that all the time, and we feel that way because all of a sudden that connection between God and man and woman and humankind and creation is disrupted because of the fall. And so that
Boy.
anxiety is part of that fallen condition, right? That God wants to heal us of. But he's not mad at us that we have that disconnection. He came so that he could restore the
Mm-hmm.
communion between us and God and each other.
Again, 888-318-7884. Some people, though, will say, I try this, Dr. Popjack. I give it to
Mm-hmm.
God. I say, I turn this over to you to God, but I keep thinking about it. I keep worrying about it. So what am I doing
Yeah.
wrong? Why does it not work, so to speak?
Well, it actually is working. It's just not working the way you thought it should, right? So when we
Okay.
give something to God, we often think what that means is, okay, I've said, okay, God, it's yours now. You take it and run with it. And then I get to just kind of toddle off and do my thing. But really, it's like this. So when I was a kid, I had terrible math anxiety, right?
Hmm.
I would sit there in front of my algebra or whatever, and all the numbers would just swim, and I was scared to death, and I just desperately wanted my parents to just tell me the answer, right?
Hmm.
And so I would say, "Mom, Dad, just what do I do? Tell me what to do." But they wouldn't give me the answer, and they wouldn't give me the answer not because they didn't love me.
Hmm.
They sat down next to me and they said, "Okay, well, what's the next step? Okay, now let's look at the next step." Right? Well, giving something to God is exactly like that. Right? God, when we give something to God, He says, "Okay." I mean, now sometimes He takes it away, but most of the time He doesn't. What He does is He sits at the table with us and He does our homework alongside of us, and He says, "Okay, let's look at the next step. Let's solve the next thing together." So the fact that I'm thinking about it doesn't mean that I haven't given it to God. It means that He's saying, "Let's work through it together." and let's do it step at a time. And he does that again, not because he doesn't love us, but because he wants us to be strong, and he wants us to not be afraid in the future, and he wants us to know that we can do it with his grace. And so let's walk through this together. So the fact that you're thinking about it still doesn't mean that you've failed to give it to God properly, or you haven't found the right formula. It means that God knows that you can do this, and he wants to do it with you, and he's going to take you through it step at a time. You just keep bringing it back to him and saying, okay, God, what's the next piece in this? Show me what I need to do next.
Right.
Okay, what do I need to do after that? And step by step, he gets me through that challenge, but he also uses that challenge to draw closer to me and build a stronger connection with me, so that I know that there's nothing that I can go through that he won't walk through with me, and that I don't have to be afraid because I can do these things through him.
Well, I have another question for you, but I'm starting to feel like maybe I'm sensing the answer, at least the beginnings of an answer. So we might seek medicine, we might seek counseling for anxiety. I was going to ask you about, am I letting God down if I do that? And I will ask you that, but I'll follow that with, are there types of counseling or medication that would be the best to seek if I'm dealing with intense anxiety?
Sure. Well, first of all, no, you're not letting God down by seeking appropriate help, because one, that's reaching out for greater connection, and it's helping you get new skills to be able to deal with these things. So, and God wants us to be strong, and he wants us to be healthy, and he wants us to be connected. So it's good to reach out for help. There's actually a lot of research on this that talks about how, say, with depression, a combined approach of counseling and medication together is most effective. The reverse is actually true with anxiety. What they find is that with anxiety, counseling alone is actually the most effective treatment, because when people take anxiety medication, they tend to learn to become a little more dependent on it, and so they don't build up the muscles, the resilience, if you will, by using skills. It's just easier to take the medication than it is to learn the skills, right? And so what happens is I get less and less return on my investment, if you will, for having taken the medication over time. Now, if you're hearing this and you're on medication, don't go off of it. If you have concerns, talk about it. Talk about it with your physician or your psychotherapist, and work out a plan. But again, the research tends to show that for most people, with anxiety, counseling alone that's focused on building skills is the most effective option for treatment. But always defer to whatever your treatment plan is with your current provider if you are seeking medication or help for anxiety.
We got to take our first break. Dr. Greg Popcak with us. More to Life with Dr. Greg and Lisa Popcak each day on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. And he's got lots and lots of books. Maybe the one most appropriate to what we are talking about today, Unworried, A Life Without Anxiety. That's it. We're talking anxiety, and half of our lines are open. We got 3 lines full, 3 lines open, 888-318-7884.
Catholic Answers Live.
Homeschool Connections, an online provider of courses for your Catholic homeschool and your homeschool co-op, is a sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. Homeschool Connections website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features texts of daily Mass, prayers, articles, meditations, art commentaries, and more, in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church, on the web at magnificat.com.
Alexian Brothers is a proud sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. For 800 years, these Catholic brothers have offered a prophetic and daring response to the gospel, serving Christ in the sick, the poor, and the dying. Is God calling you to be a courageous disciple? If you feel called to total self-giving as a religious brother in the mission of Jesus, call our vocations office at 847-264-8703. That's 847-264-8703. AlexianBrothers.org.
EWTN is now on Twitter. Get short, timely messages from EWTN on your computer or cell phone. It's easy to stay up to date on a wide variety of topics. Pro-life news, Vatican announcements, catechesis, apologetics, the latest EWTN programming, and more. You can link to EWTN on Twitter from our homepage or go to twitter.com/EWTN. At work, at home, at school, and on the road. Stay connected to your world with EWTN's Twitter page.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Dr. Greg Popcak, our guest. Among his books, Unworried, A Life Without Anxiety. If you have questions about anxiety from the scientific perspective, from the faith perspective, those are the perspectives he comes at these problems with, and you are welcome here. 888-318-7884. We'll go to Indiana to start. I believe Indiana. Or it could be Idaho. Is that Idaho? I'm not exactly sure what the person was trying to communicate as the state, but either Indiana or Idaho. Tony, listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM Satellite Radio. What should I have said? What state should I have said, Tony?
Idaho.
Okay, all right. I got it.
From Idaho.
All right.
Close.
Hey.
Well, thank you so much. I'm the first-time caller, and I appreciate you both so much. In essence, my question is this. By way of a brief background, has to do with my most difficult marriage early on and its effect on our children. Our children now range from 24 to 38, so they're adults. But each of us is suffering in our own way from depression, anxiety, our youngest OCD, and all of it really stemming from wounds of the heart, wounds from childhood, for me, wounds from our, and we're all under a psychiatrist care. Some of us have even tried TMS, which has been very effective. But my question is, when it comes to therapy, are there any particular forms of therapy that would be most effective? I've heard of EMDR. I'm not familiar with it. So are there different forms of therapy to consider with this kind of situation?
Yeah, for the kind of difficulties you're describing, I'm really partial to something called internal family systems therapy, and let me explain what that is. So it sort of takes family therapy and uses that model for helping you deal with the different parts of yourself. So every single one of us has different parts, if you will. So we even say that, part of me wants to have, go to the Chinese restaurant for dinner, and part of me wants to go to the Italian place, right? It's a metaphor. We don't really have parts. It's not like you have to worry about having multiple personalities or something like that. But it's all of us have different parts of us that sort of feel this way about this or feel this way about that. So, for example, if somebody goes to counseling, part of them might want to get better, but that part of them might be afraid to make some changes, because if they do, then they might lose other opportunities or other things that they're trying to address. So IFS has those different parts come together in conversation with each other. And it helps you learn how to facilitate that internal dialogue that has those different parts, not fight with each other or be at war with each other, but learn to love and respect and listen to each other, so that you in the executive position can kind of help, if you will, facilitate a board meeting with the different parts of your heart that allow you to be able to hear from all those different parts and then make a decision based on all the concerns or needs that those different parts are expressing. And so when you have these kinds of wounds that you're talking about, there might be a child part of you, or a 7-year-old part, or a 10-year-old, or a 14-year-old part, all that learn different things at different times in your life, that are all concerned about different needs or addressing different fears. And this process will teach you how to sit down with those different parts and identify their needs and work together. And if you work with a faithful provider, with God, to be able to learn how to meet those needs in ways that work for all of you, instead of just one part or the other that tend to fight with each other.
Wonderful. Gosh, thank you so very, very much. God bless you both.
I'm going to plug a book by a friend, actually. Dr. Jerry Crete wrote a book called Litanies of the Heart, which describes a Catholic approach to internal family systems. It's a wonderful book. And we actually use that model at CatholicCounselors.com with all of our team as well.
Litanies of the Heart, Tony. Tony, thanks.
Wonderful. Hi, thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah, it was great talking with you. Dr. Greg Popcak is our guest. Just two lines open now, 888-318-7884. Going to Trenton, Illinois, where Linda is listening on 92.7 FM. Awful glad to have you, Linda. Go ahead with your question.
I just need some, well, first of all, I've been looking for a counselor, and I can't find one that my insurance will cover because I'm on Medicare. So I don't know what to do. I don't know how to reach out to find one. that I can speak to.
In terms of looking for local
So,
resources that would be covered by Medicare, I'd encourage you to reach out to Catholic Charities in your diocese. They would be the most likely place to connect you with some local resources that would be able to accept your Medicare coverage.
so reach out to the Catholic diocese. Over in
Catholic
Belleville, I
Charities
believe
in
it is.
your diocese, yeah.
Okay, yeah. All right.
But
Well,
you mentioned, I don't know,
that's
you
good
mentioned
to
to the
know.
screener, I don't know if you wanted to talk about it. You mentioned that you were struggling with some anxiety around your marriage issue and needed some guidance. Did you have a specific question about that, or did you just want?
Yeah, I have a lot of anxiety about things that have gone on for a long, long time. Okay, and it's hard for me to talk about like out in the open, knowing that other people can hear this stuff. And like I said, I have spoke to a priest, and there were some things that happened, like that shouldn't have been going on. I'll put it to you like that, and it's very disturbing.
Okay,
And
so
personal.
you're wanting to keep it private and find somebody locally to work with. And so I'd encourage you to reach out to Catholic Charities in your diocese for a local referral. But then also, if you're interested, you can learn more about our approach through the book "Unworried: A Life Without Anxiety." There are a lot of different techniques, psychological, emotional, relational, and spiritual techniques that I describe in the book to help people face anxiety and the problems that are responsible for it.
Linda, thank you very much for that call. On we go. Susan is in Killeen, Texas, listening on the Guadalupe Radio Network. Susan, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Greg Popcak.
Hey there. I'm in Abilene, Texas, and I want to shout out to my brother Robert, who's a truck driver and a faithful listener to.
Oh, is he? He's one of our faithful listeners? Yeah. Well, Robert, thanks for tuning in while you're driving. Call in sometime.
Love you, bro. Yeah, absolutely. I'm calling today because my husband has cancer.
Oh.
And that's created imagine a really great deal of anxiety in my life. I'm a homemaker, and so he's our sole source of income, so it's been stressful for him as well. He just got a new job, so it's been difficult. At any rate, I did the 8-week Catholic mindfulness retreat for Lent, and that really helped with my anxiety. But now that the retreat is over, I'm really struggling. And I was really happy to hear that you have a book. I'm thinking I have to get this book, Unworried: A Life Without Anxiety. Okay, I'm gonna. That sounds great. I also feel like if I would do my mindfulness practice, I would be better. And I loved that you said relationships really help, because I find when I go volunteer at a funeral or go play mahjong with the girls and have real connection, it does help. It helps with the anxiety.
Mm-hmm. And in addition to the book, at CatholicCounselors.com, if you look in the shop section, there we offer actually a group course on anxiety as well. It's called Unworried, and it's led by Ann Burnett, who's one of our pastoral counselors. She's terrific, and she works with the book, but also additional resources in group to help folks combat anxiety. So between that and the pastoral counseling we offer through CatholicCounselors.com and Unworried, we have a lot of different ways to help you if you're looking for more personalized assistance.
Yeah, where do I find that again?
CatholicCounselors.com.
Okay, CatholicCounselors.com. Yes, I think I might need a little more help. I appreciate you. And prayers for Corey. He has throat cancer, and he's a salesman. So.
I'm very sorry, but I thank you for calling, and we certainly will keep you in our prayers. Thank you very much, Susan.
Thank you.
St. Peregrine, pray for Corey and all cancer victims.
Yeah. St. Peregrine is I assume, the patron
saint of cancer.
I was thinking throat. I don't know. I thought you. I'm glad you said.
Well, St. Blaise. I guess St. Blaise. Yeah.
St. Blaise. Yeah, right. I got my. So, what is the treatment for, say, I don't know what the words are here, but they're like you might have, as Susan just did. I hadn't thought about this. Anxiety that would come because of a traumatic life event that's just really a one-time event. Is thinking about the anxiety that might be brought up by that different than a kind of chronic anxiety that a person might have?
It's different, but they're similar mechanisms. So you think about it this way: if you let's say you soaked your hand in bleach or something, you would get a burn on your skin, right? It would become irritated, and anytime you brushed it up against anything, it would hurt. Well, the chemicals that wash through your brain when you have a traumatic experience are caustic as well, and they aggravate parts of your brain like the hypothalamus or excuse me, the hippocampus, not the hippocampus, and other similar structures in the brain that are responsible for anxiety. And so what happens then is they become a little bit raw and red, right? And so anytime you experience anxiety, when you experience that wash of chemicals in your system, you feel it more intensely. Very much like if you burn the skin on your hand, right? And you touch something, it would even just picking up a cup would hurt. And the same thing is true when you get enough of those chemicals washing over your brain, it sensitizes you to all stress and anxiety, and you have a stronger reaction to it than somebody else who had not gone through those traumatic experiences.
Dr. Greg Popcak is our guest. Just 2 lines open, but you can have them. All you got to do is dial 888-318-7884. We're talking anxiety with Dr. Greg. More right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Lots of people have big questions about Catholicism. It needs a big book of answers, and now it's got one. The Big Book of Catholic Answers is filled with helpful replies to more than 250 questions about the faith. Questions about God, salvation history, the Creed, the Bible, the list goes on and on. Order your copy of the Big Book of Catholic Answers today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun, and that is exactly what our good friend Joe Heschmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, of morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron.
What is the Catholic Church? Everyone seems to have an opinion, but the Church never quite fits into the boxes people make for it. In The Faith Unboxed, author Andrew Petiprin looks at some of the most common boxes people put the Catholic Church in and explains why they don't fit. In doing so, he brings us closer to what the Church really is, the institution founded by Christ. Order The Faith Unboxed today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Dr. Greg Popcak, our guest. The book that we've been mentioning, Unworried, A Life Without Anxiety, one of Dr. Popcak's many books. You can get that wherever you get your good books. I mean, I'm sure it's there. Dr. Greg Popcak is also the founder of the Pastoral Solutions Institute. If you need them or their services, that's CatholicCounselors.com, right? That's Catholic.
That's right. Yeah.
So
everybody just calls it CatholicCounselors.com now. So it became known by the website.
You know, there were people that a few years ago told us, with all the changes, we should just change our name to Catholic.com because .com is the thing that everybody just wants to know, where can I find you? That's all. So, but we never did. But
right.
All right, let's go down to Virginia. Elise is in Virginia. Hello. Hang on, Elise. I pushed the wrong button. Hello, Elise. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Popcak.
Hi. My son is 10 years old, and he's had some negative social interactions over the last year that have left him with some anxiety this year. And this spring, it seems to be getting worse because he's like so afraid of bugs that he won't even go outside. And I'm like, how do I help him? I have no idea.
Can I ask what you're doing now? Like, how do you try to help him now?
I have been allowing him to avoid those social interactions. So there was a kid that was kind of pushing him and kind of bothering him. So I said, you know what, we don't have to go to that event anymore. It's fine. You can stay home from that. And then with the bugs, I've been trying to give him a safe way to get outside, as much as I can, or walk with him, hold his hand as we go outside together. But it's hard. It's hard for him.
Okay. So, and it's okay in some instances to kind of give kids a way out of the thing that's causing them anxiety. But for some kids, that becomes then their main coping strategy, avoidance. And the more we avoid the things that cause us anxiety, the more anxious we tend to get. In fact, that's sort of the pattern that leads to agoraphobia for some people, right? Agoraphobia being that fear of even leaving the house. And so, where
Sure.
I have to avoid all the different things that I'm afraid of. So a better strategy, and this might be a situation where, you and or he both want to talk to a counselor to try to get through this all together. But let me just offer some kind of first aid strategies here. The best way to approach it is with anxiety. A lot of what if messages go through my head. What if the bug lands on me? What if I get stung? What if, what if the bully attacks me? What if this? A nice way to kind of think about it is even if, to turn that what if into even. So even if the bug lands on me, what could I do? Even if I got stung, how could I respond? Even if I run into that bully someplace, how would I handle that? And you actually kind of think through and even rehearse, like role play the situation where maybe you pretend to be the bully and you're coaching your son through the tone of voice and the posture that he should have, and you're practicing it in a safe environment where you can really help him develop that muscle memory that allows him to feel physically confident in those different situations. The other thing you want to avoid though is cheerleading. Like a lot of parents will say, "Oh, you don't have anything to be afraid of. It's okay," and we mean well when we do that, but what the kid hears is you don't really get it. And so they just turn us off, right? It's like the old Charlie Brown thing, wah, 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 right? That's all they hear. And so anything we say when we're trying to cheerlead just kind of bounces off the kid. So it's better to really empathize with them and say, no, I can really understand why that would be scary. That would be upsetting for me too. So even if that happened, what could we do about that? What would be one small thing you could do to feel a little bit more powerful, a little more confident, or a little less scared? And you kind of coach them through that next step, and then the next step, and the next step through that. I would say start with that approach where you empathize, but then point towards solutions and skill building. If you find that that's not really cutting it, then I'd encourage you to reach out to us at CatholicCounselors.com. We could start working with you, for example, to learn how to be a more effective coach with him, and then possibly bring him into the process if necessary. But where possible, we like to really help the parents be their kids' primary resource, and we can kind of coach you through some of those things to be able to support him, or bring your son into if that's necessary.
Great. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, that's great. And his family doctor had recommended that we go to counseling, and my older son's been through counseling, and I'm like, when they're this age, it doesn't always work. I found, it's
Right.
kind of when they're a little older, teen years. They
Well,
get it
and
more,
actually, yeah.
but-
So
Yeah.
this is probably a hot take, but generally speaking, individual therapy for kids and especially teens tends not to be terribly effective. It's really much more effective if parents can go with, or sometimes if parents can go instead. Because for a situation like this, we would start by helping you use these kinds of strategies to coach your son through it, so that he could really see you as the primary resource, and you could help provide that structure that helps him, remember to do the stuff. But when parents send kids to individual counseling, often what will happen is that the child either doesn't disclose things, or they don't have the ability to follow through whenever they go home. And so it tends not to work quite as well as when the parents are directly involved. So those would be some strategies. Also, the book Unworried has a lot of strategies that you could read and then adapt for him. Or, as I said, one of our counselors could help you adapt for him as well.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Great, Elise. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're talking anxiety, and we got lots of folks on the line, so I'm going to keep moving. Let's go down and let's go over to Orlando, Ohio. Orlando in Ohio. I beg your pardon. Orlando, right. Welcome. I'm struggling today for some reason. I don't know why, but I'm glad you're here, Orlando. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Greg Popcak.
Hi, Dr. Greg. Orlando here. I told the man there when he asked me, it's like we've had a family business since 1964. My dad and I ran it, my grandfather and dad, and then my dad and I for 50 years. Now, my son's 42 and daughter 41, and they're running it, and they kind of don't want us involved or have any part of it. So it's creating some anxiety and stuff.
And when you say that they want you involved, like what happens? How have you tried to be involved, and what are they saying to you exactly?
Well, I was there since I was a little kid, so developed, pretty much did every job in the place and had a major responsibility in it. And then over the years, they just kind of moved in, and all of a sudden, my dad and I are big dummies, and they know everything, and we don't know anything. So they really have created a lot of friction.
So what I'm hearing you say, though, is that you guys haven't been able to have a conversation of what role you could play or how you could be involved. Like, have they said, Dad, you're not allowed here at all? Or have you guys been able to sit down and say, what role could...
That's pretty much, Dad, we don't want you here at all. And as far as my dad, he's still with us. He's 95, and they're really not respecting him very much either.
So, but when I'm kind of reading between the lines, though, what I'm hearing is it's not that necessarily the kids wouldn't want you there at all. It's that the way that you've been there hasn't been helpful to them, right? And I think that if you could be humble right. and go to them and say, right, and if you could go to them and say, look, I want to give you guys control of this. It's hard for me, but I recognize that you guys have to run it now. You're the adults in your 40s. You're the ones who are going to take this business to the next generation. But I'd like to have some role to play. What could I do that would actually be helpful, that would allow you to feel like I wasn't stepping on your toes, but that would let me be involved in some way. And be open to the suggestions and try that conversation first, and then see where it goes from there. But succession planning is really challenging, and there actually are counselors who specialize in family therapy with regard to succession planning, and so that might be something you want to look into if this doesn't work. But I would say start there first, and see not so much if they would allow you to be there at all, but how could they let you be there that they would experience as actually helpful.
Okay, Orlando.
Now, these family counselors with the succession, can I stay on and get names or phone numbers for somebody, or?
You know what? I would just recommend Googling those two terms, because there's a guy who, I forget the university that he works with right now, but there's a guy who specializes that in particular and does telehealth with that. He's a good guy. I've just blocked on his name, but if you Google family counseling, succession planning, he'll come up.
Orlando, I'm going to say thank you because we got to get to the break. Dr. Greg Popcak is our guest. Our number, 888-318-7884. Back to more calls and conversations about anxiety, both from the position of science. Dr. Greg Popcak is, of course, trained in psychotherapy, but also from the position of faith, because both have a great deal of concern for the well-being of the person, and so we employ them both here. If you've got a question, 888-318-7884.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
Support for Catholic Answers Live comes from the Graduate School of Theology at Christendom College. Deepen your understanding of the Catholic faith through live online graduate courses, taught with uncompromising fidelity to the Church's magisterium, from Christology and bioethics to Mariology and more. This summer, you can also attend the Institute for Liturgical Formation on campus. Begin your master's degree or earn a certificate at graduatetheology.com. That's graduatetheology.com.
Who was the first Catholic in your family? Were they evangelized by a friend, a coworker, a stranger? Did you ever think that you could be that person that God uses to save a soul? And that soul could save their family, their grandchildren, and generations to come. At St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, we train, equip, and mobilize Catholic disciples to do the urgent work of evangelization. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization, streetevangelization.com.
Mother Angelica had a simple goal when she began EWTN: to reach the world with the gospel message. EWTN is the most trusted source of authentically Catholic content on the air today, featuring Mother Angelica, Dr. Ray Gurendi, and Father Benedict Groeschel. We've never wavered from our mandate to proclaim the truth and majesty of the Catholic faith. Thank you for joining EWTN in this mission.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. I got to stop giving out the phone number because we've got too many calls. I got to try to get everybody on here with Dr. Greg Popcak, our guest. I'm developing anxiety about this. I don't need to be anxious. I can be concerned, but I don't need to be anxious. Unworried is the book we've been talking about, A Life Without Anxiety, from Dr. Greg Popcak. And back to the phones we go. David is in Eagle, Idaho. I have now identified that postal code, Eagle, Idaho. Welcome, David.
Yes, thank you. I just, I've been dealing with a lot of struggles with dealing with going to confession. I've always been a really well-devoted Catholic. I've been born and raised by my parents who are converts. My father was raised with pretty much nothing. My mother was raised a Lutheran. So I've been pretty much raised by converts. But I cradle Catholic almost my whole life. And so I've always loved the Lord. I know what his purpose is for me, even though sometimes I don't. But it's just, I've always had anxieties over a lot of things, more than just confession, like social anxiety, panic whenever I socialize with people a lot. And, I just can't really do things that requires me so much, social anxiety. And so, and in my whole life, I've also been diagnosed with cerebral palsy. And I just, in my whole life, I've always, felt depressed and angry, sometimes resentful. And so I've been reading lots of books written by saints and everything. And I've also learned things from St. Augustine, who struggled a lot through his challenges of living the Catholic faith, because he was only raised in the faith by his mom, who was a serious Catholic, and his father was a serious pagan. And so what I've learned through, ancient writings and stuff like that, especially through the lives of saints, especially Augustine, is that I realize that sometimes my heart or even my spirit can be restless until I rest in Jesus. And sometimes it's hard for me to put myself in Jesus' hands. So I just want to know, how I can overcome that.
How you can overcome the struggle to put yourself in the Lord's hands?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the question is, what does that really mean, right? How would we know if we were? And I think it goes back to what I was talking about with Sai a little bit earlier. When we give something to God, we kind of tend to think that means that it's going to go away. I shouldn't be anxious about this anymore. I shouldn't be worried about it anymore because I've given it to God. But most often what happens is that rather than taking it away, what God does is he sits next to us and wants to walk us through it step by step so that we can learn that he doesn't want us to be afraid, and he wants us to be strong moving forward. And so the best way to approach anything is to say, okay, God, show me how to respond to this, whatever this is in front of me, in a way that helps me glorify you, be my best self, whatever that means, and invite the people around me to be their best self too. because that's what the Holy Spirit is always asking us to do. In any situation, how can I try to be a little bit more of my best self and try to inspire or invite or challenge the people around me to be a little bit more of their best self too. And so giving something to God or putting myself in God's hands doesn't mean I'm just going to give up all my responsibilities and concerns and just blissfully trip through life. It means that I'm going to pick up my cross and follow the Lord and ask him step by step, how can I respond to this next thing in a way that helps me be a little bit more of my best self and challenge the people around me to be their best selves too. And the more I do that, the stronger I become, the more direction I have, and the more I'm able to cooperate with God's grace. And that's, I think, what really putting ourselves in God's hands means. It doesn't mean giving up responsibility. It doesn't mean not feeling the feelings that we have. It means responding to it in the way that allows us to be our best and try to invite others to be their best as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, David?
Yeah, that does really answers all the questions that I needed. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I very much appreciate the call. Thank you. From Idaho over to Massachusetts. Jim is in Massachusetts. Jim, thank you for waiting. Go ahead with your question for Dr. Popcak.
Yeah, hello. Sorry,
Hi.
I used to call you a lot about 10 years ago. My question now is, how do you do Catholic counseling and not do secular counseling? I don't get that.
Well, so kind of what's the difference between the two? Yeah, so any counselor is going to have in his mind what a healthy, flourishing person looks like, or what healthy relationships should look like. So every counselor has a sort of sense of what you should look like when you're done with treatment. And a secular counselor is going to have secular ideas about what that is, right? Whereas a Catholic counselor, like through CatholicCounselors.com, we work really hard to approach everything through the lens of what is the Catholic vision of the person, what is the Catholic vision of relationship, and how can we help you use both psychological and spiritual tools to live out that vision of the person and relationship. And so we use those psychological tools, but we use them toward that goal of helping you be a more effective disciple of Christ, to live the Catholic vision of life and love, and so that you can come out not just of your work with us, for example, not just experiencing fewer symptoms, but having more ability to live a full integrated Christian life.
Okay, my question is, I had bought a book on mindfulness, and it was mostly secular things, secular ways to do it, which maybe would even be more Buddhist or whatever, Eastern.
Yeah, a lot of approaches to mindfulness are, yes.
Yeah, the lady that was she said that she took a Catholic mindfulness, and I was kind of wondering what that was all about.
Gotcha, John. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So all right. So mindfulness is a little tricky, okay, because in the secular approaches to mindfulness do draw largely from Buddhist spirituality, and that can be problematic for Catholics. Mindfulness objectively just means the space that exists between a feeling and an action, right? So then that's where free will lives. So if something happens to me and I have an emotional reaction to that, if I just react to that reaction and just do something right away. So you upset me and I slap you, or I experience a problem and I just do the first thing to make me feel better. That's not mindful. I'm just reacting. I'm not choosing the healthiest response to a situation. But I can learn to create greater space between my emotional reaction and my physical response to the problem. And that space that exists between those things is what's known as mindfulness. And every spiritual practice, including Catholicism, has approaches that help to build that space between the emotion and the reaction. And there are approaches that you can take in a Christian context that teach that kind of healthy approach to mindfulness. In fact, Dr. Greg Bottaro has several books on Catholic mindfulness and those sorts of things. We refer to it as receptivity. St. John Paul talked about this in his Theology of the Body, the idea of receptivity to the Holy Spirit, where I can experience something and then in that moment kind of pause my reaction and not just respond right away, but really take it to the Lord and say, okay, God, how do you want me to respond to this? And then as I reflect and pray on that, then I can make an intentional response to the challenge instead of just reacting out of an emotional space. So so that's what mindfulness is objectively. Unfortunately, most secular approaches to mindfulness really draw heavily from Buddhist spirituality, and that's what makes it problematic for Catholics.
Jim, I'm glad to hear from you again. Thank you very much for the call. I'm going to go to Donna in Kansas before we have to go. Donna? Oh, no, can I go to Donna in Kansas? Did we lose Donna in Kansas? I'm not sure what happened there, but I'll tell you what, I'll ask Donna's question because we dropped her. I hope I didn't drop her. But she wanted to know how to learn to deal with anxiety if there is no counselor available to her.
And I'm not sure what she means by not being a counselor available, but the good news is because of telecounseling, there's greater access to counseling help than ever before. So if it's just that there isn't somebody locally that she's comfortable working with, or she lives in maybe a rural area where there aren't a lot of resources, again, that's why organizations like CatholicCounselors.com can be so important, because all of our work is telecounseling. So we have clients all over the world. In fact, so I have a team of 20 pastoral counselors that work in a Catholic integrated way with Catholics all over the world. And we do over 30,000 sessions a year with Catholic individuals, couples, and families. And so if that's something that you think you'd be interested in, I'd invite you to come on over to CatholicCounselors.com to learn more about what we do.
I hope you will. Thank you for. Sorry we didn't get to talk, Donna, but another time. I've been fortunate enough to have Dr. Greg Popcak with us about once a month lately. So if you'll call back next month, you'll probably catch him. As I said, Dr. Greg Popcak is our guest. More to Life with Dr. Greg and Lisa Popcak each morning on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. He's also the founder of what I will now call CatholicCounselors.com. So you've talked about this a bit, and because we lost our last caller, I'll take the opportunity to talk with you about it on the air. Your sense is that this telehealth, that is having a video conference or even a phone conversation with a counselor, might treat anxiety as well as, or maybe even better in some cases, than taking the car over to the office and going in to sit with the person.
Well, there's actually a lot of research that shows that telehealth is as effective, if not more effective in some cases, because it's easier to access the appointment, right? If I'm going, and I'm not just trying to discourage anybody, by the way, from seeking face-to-face counseling, but it is more difficult, right? Because you got, half an hour to 45 minutes or so to get to the appointment. You got the appointment itself, and then the half hour, 45 minutes back. It's 3 hours of your day. When you're doing telecounseling, you can do it wherever you are. You keep doing what you're doing until it's time for your appointment, and you keep your appointment. So the ease of access, people tend to actually be less hesitant to jump right into their difficulties or whatever they need to talk about whenever they're doing it either on the phone or via video. There's a little bit more dancing around whenever you go face to face. There's always a sort of 5 minutes or so of let's feel each other out kind of thing. And so they tend to use the time a little bit more efficiently as well. So between the easier access to sessions and the more efficient use of the time, there tend to be really good outcomes and I'd say for telecom, for like actually using the telephone as opposed to video, that's even more effective in some ways because you get what's called the disinhibition effect, which is basically confession behind the screen, right? I mean, obviously we can't give absolution, but there's this sort of anonymity that comes with that approach that allows me to just open up a lot more readily than I would even if I'm using, Zoom or video teleconferencing. So there's a lot of research that really shows that remote counseling, whether it's by telephone or video conference, is as effective, if not even more effective than face-to-face work.
That's fine, because a lot of times I know a lot of the priests around here, and I still prefer. I know they know who's there. I still prefer to go behind the screen. I do feel like I do a better job of confession if I'm behind the screen. It's just
yeah, and that's how the disinhibition effect allows us to open up a lot more readily when we feel like there's some degree of anonymity.
Well, I want to say thank you very much. I appreciate this. I'm glad we've been able to do this more often. It's obvious from the number of calls we get that it is much needed. I want to send people back to your book, Unworried: A Life Without Anxiety. Get it all over. It's it's out there. Find it. Unworried: A Life Without Anxiety. It's okay to be concerned. This is what I learned today, but you don't have to be anxious. Concern can lead to, tell me, no, don't, let me see if I get it right. You're concerned, you gather your resources, you make a plan, and now I forgot the last one.
And basically you make the plan and you solve the problem.
Okay.
Whereas anxiety, you just worry about it rolling you over and spinning you out.
Yeah, right. I guess, I got anxious at the end. I thought I wasn't going to finish that. All right, Dr. Greg Popcak, our guest. We're going to take a quick break. Ben Bollinger will be here, and we're going to talk about the papacy, the scriptural evidence for the papacy. Your call's welcome for that as well. 888-318-7884.